Do you think your players don't role-play enough? Perhaps you aren't giving them enough opportunities to do some real role-playing and be immersed in the story and the game. My name is Mike, and this is the Game Master's Vault. In this episode, we'll be talking all about immersion in role-playing games. Immersion means that you're present and invested in the game, and that you care about the characters and what's happening in the story. Your players should be whisked into a far-off land where they feel like they're characters. For some, on one end of the spectrum, that means getting dressed up in their character for game night and only talking in character. On the other end are players who refer to their characters in the third person and seem to distance themselves from character development other than leveling up. What we should strive for is a happy medium between total immersion and simply playing a game. If you've watched any Critical Role, you know it's a very immersive game, and it should be, with all the players being professional actors. They are great with exploring character development, voice acting, and playing off each other to tell a great story. A vast majority of home games are not like Critical Role. Even though your table should be run the way that you and your players feel most comfortable as far as immersion is concerned, I think most of us would like to have at least more engaged players, closer to the players on Critical Role. What can we do as GMs to make our games a little more immersive? Let's go to the vault to look at 9 tips to increase immersion at your table. To get more immersion in our games, the players have to be invested, engaged, and attentive. How we achieve that is by creating situations at the table that make our game feel more real. Here are 9 things that you can work on over your next few sessions to ramp up the realism of your world. Number 1, use better descriptions. When you're describing an NPC, a tavern, or even a river, try to use at least 3 of the 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. In a tavern, for example, you might describe how the tables are sticky from not being washed down properly, the smell of old tobacco ashes and stale mead being almost overpowering, how they hear a soft but distinct crunching sound as their boots squash walnut shells littering the wooden floorboard. Use vivid adjectives in your descriptions. Don't just say you see a waterfall up ahead, rather say, from a distance you hear the thundering roar of a large waterfall. As you approach, you see a massive flow of water cascading over a granite rock formation 50 feet in the air, the sunlight reflecting tiny sparkles off droplets formed from its turbulent crash into the pool below. A quick gust of wind and a cooling mist covers your face. What do you do? You can include the occasional irrelevant thing to make your world seem more alive: a startled animal running through the brush, townsfolk arguing outside a shop. You should also practice your descriptions. Find RPG artwork on Pinterest, study for a few seconds, and then close your eyes and describe the scene. What do you see, hear, taste, smell, and feel? Number 2. Create memorable NPCs. We'll be covering this more in depth in a later video, but here's some quick ideas. There are plenty of videos on doing accents for your NPCs, but you don't need them if you're not comfortable doing accents. Taliesin Jaffe was on an episode of GM Tips with Satine Phoenix, and he described a great way to give your NPCs great voices without using accents. It's the 7 Dwarves method. Think of the 7 dwarves from Snow White: Doc, Sleazy, Grumpy, Bashful, Sleepy, Happy, and Dopey. Just pick one for your NPC. Make it male or female, and then choose low, mid, or high for the tone. I'll put a link for that video in the description. Say your NPCs meet an old witch in the forest. Give her the grumpy female low template, and she'll be believable. You can also change your own body language as you talk. Slouch over and give a little gravel to your voice. I'd recommend watching videos or reading about body language, as it conveys much more information than the actual words that we speak. Give the players a picture of the NPC. Here's an example of how I do it. A small 2.5 by 3.5 picture from the web or one of Paizo's face cards in a hard baseball card sleeve. I use a cut-down index card behind the picture. The front has the name properly spelled for players taking notes, and the back has notes for me, such as their Seven Dwarfs voice. Making NPCs memorable isn't just about giving them silly voices. It's about their quirks, mannerisms, sayings, and physical descriptions too. Two of my memorable NPCs are Mo and Kamei. Now, Kamei is a female halfling that runs the local general store. No silly voices, she's not missing a leg or anything, but she's a hugger. Everyone that comes into her store gets a hug. Everyone. And she's halfling height. So sometimes it's a little uncomfortable and awkward, but it's memorable. Mo the lightning god was a fun one. The PCs met this boy, about 12 years old, who acted as if he'd suffered a stroke. His right side didn't seem to work properly. He slurred his words, always talked about himself in the third person, and wore a metal bowl on his head with a 2-foot metal rod sticking out of the top. The PCs learned that Mo was struck by lightning last year, and his mother believes that being struck by lightning again is the only thing that will cure him. Mo was desperate to be struck again, asking any wizard to zap the crap out of him. Humor can be a great way to make an NPC memorable. But also remember that your NPCs have lives, jobs, relationships, hopes, dreams, and inner demons. NPCs don't just freeze in time and space as soon as the PCs leave the room. If the PCs come back to a town, how have the NPCs changed? Keep good notes on your NPCs. Perhaps one of the PCs was dismissive of the butcher's daughter's romantic advances, and months later the PCs may have forgotten all about her, but that butcher wouldn't have. That PC was too good for his sweet daughter, and so he's going to make him pay extra for his rations and act very surly toward that PC in particular. Number 3, use props at your table. Letters, maps, photos from the web. I'm not really talking about 3D game terrain props, more like letters from the Baron with a wax seal, maps the party buys from a local guide, or journals written by a crazy artifact hunter. You can pick out a picture from the web to give the players a more concrete visual of the area that they're in. Things like keys, large gems, and even totems are great. Give your players something that they can touch and hold on to. You can check thrift stores for cheap, cool little props. You can also change your game room environment, and that's number 4. I recommend reading the book Playing Dirty by John Wick. You can play audio sounds for things like ships on the ocean, dogs barking, water dripping in a cave. A couple of the programs that I use in my games are Sirenscape and Tabletop Audio, but there are others. You can play ambient music in the background. Find some fantasy-type music that fits your tone on YouTube and just set it for autoplay. Just make sure that the volume is noticeable but not distracting. It's also a good idea not to play songs the players know, like current music or music with words. Think classical-type movie scores and soundtracks. You can heat up or down your room based on the time of year or location the players are in. In a desert, turn the heat up. Trudging through a high mountain pass, make it cold in the room. You can also turn the lights up or down. Dimmers are great for this. If your players are in the Underdark, try to dim the lights a bit. Better yet, get some colored LEDs in the room to glow purple or green. Just be sure that the players can still read their character sheets. Number 5. Use the character's name only once the game starts. It's not, "Okay, Adam, what's your character doing?" It's presto, you just witnessed the Cavalier get torched with the Necro's fireball spell. What are you going to do about it? And some GMs require any talking out of character. The player must raise their hand, make antlers, or touch their nose. But that's more up to you and your group. But I think it would cut down on the non-game talking. And players can still crack jokes in character. Number 6, remove as many distractions as possible. With a few exceptions, try to get rid of cell phones at your table. You want your players interested in the game, not playing Candy Crush or scrolling through Facebook during the game. Sure, there are valid reasons for having a cell phone close by, a sick family member, for example. Rule books at the table should be avoided during combat encounters. Don't slow things down by looking up rules, spells, or abilities in the middle of a fight. Make a ruling that seems fair and logical to you and move on. Err on the side of the players or the coolness factor. You should put your kids to bed, pets in another part of the house, and you should be set for uninterrupted gameplay. Number 7, don't let game mechanics get in the way of immersion. Your system's mechanics and rules are important, but choose your words as the GM carefully. A good example of this is the initiative conundrum from PhD 20. The PCs are exploring a cave and come across some orc children practicing with their weapons. The children notice the PCs and turn toward them. Now, if the GM asks everyone to roll initiative, the players will automatically think this is a combat encounter, let's fight. If the GM does not ask them to roll initiative, the opposite would happen. No initiative, it's not a combat encounter, we should talk to them, or what? Asking for players to roll initiative can break immersion. It's better to say, what do you do? Let the players decide what type of encounter this will be and roll initiative only after someone attacks. The game mechanic still exists, but in this way you're not letting it make the choices for you and the players about where the game is going. And the same principle can be used for most skill checks too. You should know that bonuses or modifiers your PCs have for primarily perception. Don't break immersion by asking a player to make a perception check when they walk into a room. Tell them what anyone would notice as they walk in. Make them roll if they want to look at something specific or they ask. Otherwise, passive perception should be your guide. Number 8, the balance of your encounters. Most GMs use some sort of challenge rating system to figure out how difficult an encounter would be before throwing it at the PCs. Personally, I don't put much stock into the CR system, and here's why. If I were to go into a bad part of town at night filled with gang wars and drug dealers wearing a t-shirt that said off-duty unarmed cop, I'd probably get beaten or shot, right? I went to the wrong place at the wrong time. Why should our games be any different? If a group of level 2 PCs knowingly go into a dragon's lair, they should expect to find a dragon, not 3 to 5 goblins. Constantly making every encounter a fair fight can get old. In combat encounters, we should be putting the types of monsters that live in that type of terrain up against the PCs. Sometimes the PCs will decimate the monsters in one round. Sometimes they should run far, far away. Number 9, make it personal to the characters. If you've done a proper session 0 and all your characters have good backstories, you will have plenty of material to tailor the story to your PCs. Now, you should have an overarching plot and character development arcs in your story, but what I'm talking about here is the little things. Perhaps the party is in a new town and they hear a rumor at the tavern about someone that, although it would sound like an ordinary rumor, is specific enough it can only be the relative of one of the PCs. For example, they hear of a dude in one of the mines to the north that can make rocks sing with eerie music. Nothing important to the storyline, just a tidbit to bring the world more alive. I used this in one of my games and the player's face lit up and said, "That's my dad. Can we go see him? How long would it take to get there?" It was a fun little moment. This is also a great use of your new vibrant NPCs. When the PCs get attached to them and are in danger, it becomes increasingly important for the players to bend over backwards to protect and help them. What ways do you try and increase the amount of immersion in your games? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to read some other ideas out there. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a like and subscribe to the channel for more GM tips from the Game Master's Vault. Well, that's it for this episode. I gotta go alphabetize my dice. See ya.